intent of the meeting is to provide information to people and to kind of get feedback. And the feedback is very important, and we'll provide you some great ways of doing that. And there's also been some handouts that you can fill out, but that's really what we want to hear. Also, I want to note that there is a wetlands meeting right now that's covering some of the areas that we're talking about here today. And if you are interested in going that, I think you need to go up to Route 231. That's right. So, hustle on up there. I want to make a couple introductions here first. Anthony Carr, the Chief of Operations and Public Works Director.
How are you? At this time, too, I'd also like to recognize that we have two members from the City Administration and Common Council, Mayor Rilling and his wife, Mrs. Rilling, in the back, and Council President Tom Livingston.
I'm
sorry. I apologize. I didn't see. I'm sorry.
Great. Thanks for showing up. Lisa Burns, Principal Engineer, is with us, and Chris Corey, Superintendent of Operations, also. So we're going to take
Michelle Diaz, Customer Service Rep.
Oh,
on
Michelle.
that table.
Sorry, Michelle. Michelle Diaz. She's back there. Okay, great. We can go ahead here. Okay, so here's the agenda. So introductions, we've kind of covered that, right, pretty well. We're going to talk a little bit about what's been done. You know, the city has been done a lot of work over the years. We're going to kind of highlight some of the more recent activities. We're going to talk about some of the current things that's going on right now, some of the current things that the city's doing to alleviate some of the issues, some of the planned future activities. And then importantly, as I said before, like if you've got a problem, the best way to contact the representatives of the public works departments. And then at the end, the Q&A, where we can hear from you. You can tell us where there's potential issues that you're dealing with. Because again, we're really here to listen and to try to respond to answers. Okay, so we talked about the attendees already. And so last year, 2018, was a tough year for Connecticut. I did work all over the state, and a lot of municipalities were dealing with the same issues of a lot of water. There was a lot of high-frequency storms. They were coming frequently. We ended up getting like a high groundwater area, and a lot of the cities were dealing with what we call the wet year. And we heard from Public Works across the state, and certainly Norwalk too. And I think some of you may have seen some of the impacts from that, and some of the drainage issues that around the city. And I don't know if it's climate change. I'm not a climate change expert, but it certainly seems like there's a different set of storms coming at us. When we design storms, it's really based on empirical information that has been done over a long period of time. And we're starting to reassess that a little bit and how to evaluate that. Because it seems now that some of what would be normal, like rainfall, is creating flooding issues. And it's something that the city is very aware of. And they're considering that, and you'll see it as some things moving forward. And so, as I said, it was a wet year. Although if you look at the average rainfall data, it really wasn't an exceptionally high year, but there was the intensity of the storms, and they were coming back to back. And what happens is you get saturation of the groundwater. Like under normal rain situations, the city's drainage system handles the storm water pretty well. But when you get rain after rain, it saturates the ground, and the groundwater comes up, and it makes it very difficult for the stormwater system to properly flow. As I said, there is like a increased number in the intensity of storms also, not necessarily the number, but how strong they are. We're seeing that not only in Connecticut, but nationally as well. Okay, so what has been done by the city so far? They've done a lot of work. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I know everything that the city's done over a long period of time, but they really are taking an active stance and really trying to take hold of the situation. They've evaluated some of the trouble areas, and there's a pretty broad list of it. They performed some improvements, and they hired Jacobs. So I work for Jacobs, and we're helping them work through some of the trouble areas right now as we speak. Anthony. So some of the evaluation that's being done, and I know that you can't see, you can't really see what's on this slide. We've got a copy of it in the back, but it's really more demonstrative of like all the areas that the city's currently looking at. It's a pretty big problem, and it's an expensive problem for the city to undertake. You know, it gets expensive when we start making drainage improvements. You know, as I said, this is in the back. This is kind of what we know now. And with the input that you guys give us tonight, we may be expanding this spreadsheet as well. And this is one of the key tools that the city uses to prioritize work as it's going on.
What is the color coding?
On the back, there's a key on the back, and it will tell you exactly what that color code is.
So for example, the yellow that you see in the table is an area that we've identified that could be cleaned from a heavy pipe cleaning contract, or where a contractor comes in and removes silt and debris from a pipe, a channel, etc.
Is this covering flood zone areas too?
That are coastal flood zones?
Yes.
Yeah, this covers the whole city. Yeah.
Is this online?
This
Is this
table?
information online?
No.
Pardon me?
No.
No. Can they put it online?
That's something we'll discuss internally, because it's a working list, and we don't want anybody to feel that their area is any more important or less important than others. So we want to take a holistic view and a global approach to it first before we post the areas. Because this area is not exhaustive and it's not inclusive. These are things that we've identified over time through residents writing emails, sending pictures in. So it's a work in progress.
But can we get copies of this?
Right now it's in a draft form. In the future, we'll post it online. But until we feel it with a good comfort level, we're going to keep it in its draft form for now.
So the answer is no.
Short answer.
Yeah, and as Anthony said, you know, and you'll see a little bit more of some of the stuff that the town's doing. We're trying to prioritize the projects and also forecast the budget. Okay, so some of the work that the city's already done around the city, there's been some work up by the high school, Honest Ridge High School. There's been work off Country Road by Andrews Field and on Williams Street. So the Honest Ridge School, is there anyone out there familiar with that area? Okay. So
Maybe I can jump in on this.
yeah,
one.
so Lisa's kind of about.
So Ponus Ridge,
Honest-
not
sorry.
high school.
Middle school.
So Ponus Ridge is part of a larger watershed. Ponus goes down eventually to the Norrock River, and it encompasses Thorpe, Hunters, Lloyd, New Canaan to the river. It's a very large watershed. We've identified that as certainly a study area that will be included in the upcoming drainage analysis and study. But there's been some, when there was public hearings about the Ponus expansion, the school expansion, a lot of concerned citizens came out and expressed their concerns about making sure that the project did not exacerbate downstream drainage issues. Particularly Thorpe and Hunters residents came out. With Hunters, they're tonight up in conservation, one of the projects. There is a dredging project to kind of triage a mound of debris that's been backing up the watershed. We have some mapping of that, and Larry will talk about that project a little bit later. On Thorpe, we found that after some of the big storms, that the Thorpe drainage system was full of roots, and that the pipe that went from basically Ponus School down Thorpe is under, it's in people's backyards, it's under decks and things like that, and Public Works in-house staff, Chris's team, was able to successfully remove all those roots, and will most likely go back with another contract we have to line that. But I think one of the important things, and we gave Larry, that we've been doing much more than just these three areas, but what we wanted to kind of demonstrate with this project is that there's a holistic approach. There may be things that are short and long term that need to be addressed. So we need to look at the entire watershed, and then we have a pipe that's clogged, and we have to do a lot of investigation, sometimes that takes time. But what we were able to do was we were able to go back, and when the site plan came into engineering for Ponus School, we were now very aware of the citizenry concerns about downstream flooding. And what we were able to do was we worked with the Board of Ed and our facilities manager to increase the amount of retention on site to accommodate holding the 25-year flood. It's double the size that was initially proposed for the school. It can handle 90,000 cubic feet. And kind of balancing, the city has to balance between school projects and infrastructure projects, and this is a great example of where those two kind of converge, because the infrastructure, this additional infrastructure was quite expensive, in the few hundreds of thousands of dollars to add to the project. But the school project wasn't done at the expense of the infrastructure in this case. So.
That was, now you're saying that's completed, which it's not.
It's not completed. The actual construction of this is still underway.
Yes.
This was like maybe maybe 2 weeks ago, this picture?
But they're also, we're not supposed to, let that go until they fix the problem on Thorpe Lane.
It's fixed. Thorpe, all the routes are out of Thorpe.
No,
and
it
now
has
it's
not.
fine.
No, it has not. There's still, runoff coming over there. And they're telling us that the basins, the storm drains that are on the road coming out of Ponus are not going to be changed, that seems ludicrous if they're doing this and not changing the storm drains on the exit way coming off.
Yeah, and so, excuse me, ma'am, but so what's been completed is, and actually, I think the city's done a great job of advocating for the city in opposition to the battle against the school. They had to eliminate some parking. It's like, what's been done is they've been enforcing runoff. I was out there with city staff. We were making observations, we were reporting it out. And then what was also completed was the design of increasing the retention basin. So those items have been completed. Is the project complete? No, but what's been done and what's been completed by the city is what's up there right there.
But they're not gonna redo the drains going out of the school, coming out of the runway, the exit?
For that evaluation, as far as the entire watershed, that will be part of the upcoming drainage analysis of the entire watershed all the way down to the North River, and that will look at all pipe sizes going up that corridor. But more specific questions, I'd be happy to talk with you after and make sure that your concerns are included.
We talked to Public Works, and Public Works says that's not in the plan. And that it's antiquated. The one that's there now is, all of them are antiquated. They're original.
And that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight is, please write down your concern on the paper, and let us know.
We know our concerns, believe me.
That's good. No, that's why we're here. We want to hear, we're here to hear, we're here to listen. And, we want to make improvements. That's why we're here,
And we'll be sure to incorporate that area. So the consultant who will be working with the city to evaluate various locations prone to flooding or drainage conditions, that area would be looked at holistically. But what Lisa's saying is that the site, the school, is responsible to manage a certain amount of their runoff. We've required them to address their amount plus some, so we made them increase the size of their system. So they exceed the requirements for the on-site, but you're right, the water does drain downhill, and I'm sorry.
When will we know that's completed?
The schedule for the school project or for the drainage improvements?
Just the drainage system.
I imagine, Lisa, does that look about halfway done now? I don't know how many linear feet of pipe there is there, but
I think that's something
we could get that information for you. Not a problem.
But I also, if you've emailed the city, which I believe I have some of your emails, I'd be happy to talk with you after the meeting.
And also on Ponus, the storm drains are up to the top. That's even before it rains. So I don't know what's going on there either.
The storm drain, the water level inside the structure is right
In the
below
storm
the grade.
drain, if you look in the storm drain, it's right up to the top.
Not silt, sediment, water.
The water, yeah.
Great, that's great information. Thank you. Okay,
I forgot. This is another one where we were able to use in-house resources and leverage in kind of a creative way some existing contracts we had to solve problems. In the area of Nathan Hill School, Lindcrest and William Street, Lindcrest residents experienced on 2 of the big storms last year. Basically, there's a pipe that they have in their backyards, and the pipe, during the big storms, the downstream pipes couldn't handle the flow, and that creates a hydraulic surcharge, and it backed water up, the drainage system, and the system was under so much pressure that it blew out the pipes in these people's backyards and created giant sinkholes, and then flooded their homes. So we were able, with our in-house investigation team, using TV trucks and our surveyors and our cleaning crews, identify that there was a capacity problem on William Street that was contributing to that issue. And our in-house engineering team did a design quickly. It required a new pipe to be laid across William Street, same size. We kept the old pipe as an overflow, and then we, as doing that, we had a conflict. We had to have a water main moved, but we were able to quickly get this resolved by going and teaming with our WPCA enterprise. They already had contractors on board, and they were able to quickly get out and get this done. So that was about $80,000 or $90,000, and so this one's checked off the list, hopefully now.
thanks, Lisa.
And Larry, just to give for frame of reference, the concrete box structure is a catch basin, what people refer to. The pipe that you see going over that black spiral rib pipe, the black spiral rib pipe is the storm sewer, the new storm sewer. It's a plastic pipe. And that pipe that you see over that Lisa referred to was the existing water main that needed to be relocated as a result of the drainage improvements. So I just wanted to clarify. That pipe going over is the water main.
Thank you. And as Lisa kind of pointed out, that they're to leverage some of the work through WPCA. They saw an opportunity to be efficient. Because again, there's limited funding in it, but this is a really good example of the city working together to make a pretty good improvement. And now Anthony's going to cover this one. Isn't it?
So I'm not going to bore people with the statistics, but I think it's important to credit D.P.W. staff, specifically operations. Chris, your crew did an amazing job. A little bit about this project. We had received some complaints about flooding around the County Street area and Andrews Field area in early April. Immediately following the April Public Works Committee meeting, which I think was the 3rd or the 4th, I might have that date wrong, we deployed crews out to Andrews Field, and they began cleaning multiple storm drains, pipe, and removed approximately 130 tons of sediment from all the debris-laden pipes, which allowed the wetland area adjacent to Andrews Field to drain. And as a result of their hard work, I think it took approximately 6 to 8 weeks to complete. The level within the wetland, or the wet area, dropped approximately 1 to 2 feet, and the water receded inland about 30 to 40 feet away from the homes that were affected. And I believe it was 3 or 4 homes that were affected. It could be more. It's not an exact number, but that was an approximation. There was approximately 1,300 linear feet of pipes ranging from 3-foot diameter to approximately 4.5 feet in diameter that were cleaned. The silt and sediment has been there and accumulated over a large amount of time. So it was like hard-packed snow, very, very, very dense material. So the crews worked around the clock to really get that out. And I know that from experience, removing silt and sediment packed inside a pipe for a long time, it takes a long time to get out. But just from that short-term maintenance improvement, the benefit that the residents of that area realized was astounding. And that's just for maintenance. That's not a special structure. That's not any new drainage. That's just cleaning out what's there. And I think that the crews did an excellent job. The project was just wrapped up, I believe, a week or 2 ago, Chris. So they worked very hard. So that was a good example of another in-house improvement. Now, there's a lot of these areas that are like that. Debris is filled in channels, ditches, depressions. Unfortunately, there's only so much limited staff, so much limited funding and time that to get to all these trouble spots. If the public doesn't tell us about them, or we don't experience the issues ourselves, you're just almost throwing darts on a board. which is what the first step of this meeting is tonight, is to collect all the information, compile it on the map, have customer service log all the complaints in and concerns, and then at least you could see that, surprisingly, when we looked at a few of the areas that exhibited some of the problems, you would expect that it would be along the coast or along the rivers. Just throwing dots on a map, we actually learned that a lot of these areas are inland, and they're around areas like Friendly Pond, depressions and channels that haven't been cleaned out. So intuitively, you would think it's by the ocean or by the river, which has some impact on it, but not what you would expect. So, and that's why we're going to further evaluate this with a consultant, along with in-house engineering staff who has a lot of experience. I personally have a lot of experience with flooding, both on the private and public sector side. So we definitely hear you, and we're working on it as fast as we can.
Are you saying that these are all completed? Because you say improvements completed.
Yes, so improvements completed. So the prior slide, Williams Street, right? Williams Street was completed. That work is finished. The slide before that, the school, that's ongoing. That drainage work is not yet completed. This maintenance work is completed. So 2 of the 3 projects that we've just reviewed that were done by the city were completed. The only one outstanding is the school.
You'll be working up by 5 Mile River also?
I'm sorry, 5 Mile River?
Yeah.
At this time, is that on our list? 5 Mile River, Chris and Lisa? I know we have
The
a,
Kendry Court,
Yeah.
that is not part of this drainage study, that's a separate issue.
All right. I don't care about Candy Court?
I said, why
We
not?
certainly care about McHenry Court, but that's a flood zone. There,
Right.
you met with conservation, we have no control over conservation, that meeting was upstairs. It's not that we don't care. McHenry Court is a private street, if I'm not correct, please let me know. But it is a private street in a flood zone. We met with you, with Alexis in conservation, and we did our best to get her to change the flood zone, but that's a federal flood zone, that's not a city flood zone.
So as far as I understand it, it's a mapped flood zone, correct? And yes, and to change that, you would need what's called a letter of map of revision or a letter of map amendment with FEMA. But I don't know the history. We could certainly talk offline and have another discussion.
So what I'm hearing is if you're in a flood zone, this isn't going to be taken care of.
No, that's the flood zones that are tidally impacted from the coast. So the waters that come in during the
I'm
storms.
up off of Chestnut Hill. How do I know that it's even considered?
Did you input any information? Did you provide any data about any historic flooding that you're experiencing?
Yeah.
Or that would be one of the areas we look at. So as part of taking all these different areas, right? So everybody has their concern, which is valid. Their flooding is the most important flooding. I get it. I'm in that boat too. So, when you have 100 locations and they're not all along the same line, like along the river or along the coast. In this case, this one is. But we need to really delve into those details and figure out what is causing the problem. It could be from the ocean. It could be the level of the river. It could be a combination of the ocean and the river. It could be a combination of substandard infrastructure with the river and the coast. And that's why you need a qualified professional to really analyze all this data, because this is a large amount of data that we can't.
So how do I know if my street or area is on your list, the Excel sheet you had earlier?
Good point. So if you've called customer service previously or logged, an issue or a complaint with the city, we have customer service here tonight. So after the meeting, you can go and live data. We can look up if your request is in the system, give you your number, tell you what the status is. And there's also a sheet, just in case you didn't want to wait, that Michelle had made, that was handed out as people came in. You could fill it out if you believe you've already put a customer service request in before, but just want to verify and be sure. That'll be a double check if you don't want to wait and see Michelle after the meeting.
No,
How do we know if we should be at this meeting or the conservation meeting? I'm on your list, Birchside, but I don't know which meeting I should be at.
Birchside
Birchside.
is not on conservation.
The
No.
second one on your list,
The second one,
on the chart in pink.
that is our sheet.
You should be here. Your issue is the water that is now, you have no storm drainage system on your
No
street.
storm drain
Right,
running all
that's
over.
this meeting.
this meeting?
And you're already on the list.
Okay.
You're one step ahead of so many people.
The first,
So from the information given us and the experience of having to repair these conditions, is I'm assuming one of the things you folks will be doing is recommending and setting in place a regular maintenance evaluation of the systems, because we know it'd be common sense if you accumulated silt or
Right.
roots growing in, that's going to happen again, or the potential is there. So they have to be looked at on a regular basis.
That will be incorporated as part of the drainage study, but also internally for the department.
Because
Because you're right, a little bit of maintenance does make
Yeah.
a big difference.
And by the time somebody calls, the problem's
It's already
at
there.
hand.
Understood. And just so everyone knows too, there'll be, once we progress forward with our work in studying the various areas within the city, there will be public information sessions and meetings just like this once a month. So you're gonna see the progress, you're gonna see if your neighborhood's on the list at that point, and if it's not that it never will be there.
Yeah.
But we have so many areas, and we have to prioritize based on most homes affected, most property affected, and cost.
All right, so I'll just make one other observation, because it's an area that I'm concerned about, since people are raising the issue of being in flood zones, of which I am in a flood zone, and I submitted a lot of detailed information on that. And I used to call the city on a fairly regular basis to suggest that they put on flaps. I'm down in Marvin Beach area, okay? And, you know, storm sewers were meant to take the water out to the sound, but now they bring the water in when the tides are so high.
You get title surcharge, the title backwater backs up the pipe. Yes.
And there are many communities throughout on the waterfront areas, up and down the coast, for years have put flaps in, okay, which when the water gets high enough, the flap shuts down and prevents a lot of the water from coming in. Every time I call the city, it's the Corps of Engineers issue, we're not interested, I finally gave up. So I'm very glad to hear that you're here, going to start looking at that, but I think
We'll look at every alternative.
any of the flood zone areas where there are storm sewers, you have to anticipate water now is coming in
Absolutely.
Yes.
from the Long Island.
But the
Sound.
problem is, and in my experience with the flaps,
Okay.
they can work for you. So sometimes they're
I know.
they're on a hinge, they get
There's
the
no
rust.
perfect
Sometimes it keeps the water in, and you don't want that either.
And there's no perfect solution. The other issue for me has been, and I'll just on the table, no discussion for it, but that because the city really did enforce some of its zoning, and years ago, properties were allowed to be built on waterfront areas with basements, and I have that situation across the street from me, which essentially, it's been there for 20 years already, it's created a dam underground and above ground, and there's no natural migration and flow of the water to get out of the street now because of this, okay? And there are a number of condominium developers that have created bulkheads, so the water gets pushed up and comes down to our areas, funneling down there. So that has to be looked at. We can't undo that anymore, but I think the city's gonna have to really look at some creative solutions for that, because it's only gonna get worse, and we all end up paying for this when streets get ripped up. And one last comment, which I think, it's an observation of mine, I'm retired, so I'm like a sidewalk superintendent, right? But it's my impression in my area, right, when Eversource came through installing gas lines, and ripped up streets to do this. And then when you're in a waterfront area, you're doing that, you're pretty much digging up sand, right? And I don't think the stuff was compacted back enough, all right? And I think new sort of waterways were established under the road. Some of the areas are sinking and cracking. 2 storm sewers almost collapsed, they have to be replaced on one street.
Right.
And I think the city's review, whoever does the final checkoff before you close off roads after an outside contractor has done work, particularly in flood zone areas, I think is very, very questionable, and I would urge you to take a serious look at that.
Understood.
Great, those are great comments, and there are certainly things that we hear, across the state too. And as Anthony said, there's going to be a further study that's going to be done. There's going to be monthly meetings, and we'll be assessing. And even if you're in a flood area, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get relief. It's just we have to look at it. So, okay, so these are some things that are going on right now. These are active things. So there's 5 areas of improvements that have been identified by the city, that are kind of like easier fixes, if you will. I'll go over those. They've contracted with a dredging company, so they're going to be geared up to start removing some of the sediment, remove some of the debris that's out there right now that's definitely impeding flow. And also they put out an RFQ, request for qualifications for engineering firms, for drainage specialists that the city's going to bring in, and they'll be working on all these issues with the city staff and to try to come up with like the solution. I mean, it would be great if we could fix everything, but the city just doesn't have the money right now, so it's going to be trying to be efficient with their money and try to solve as many problems as they can with the limited budget. It's a pretty big process to do it. It's not easy. The topography of North is flat, as you guys probably know a lot of it, and it makes it difficult to get the water out as it comes down from the clouds. Okay. So these are the 5 areas. These are the 5 areas that we're currently looking at. Friendly Road, Hunter's Lane, June Avenue, Keeley Drive, and Lloyd Road. And they're all up there on the map, and they're before the Conservation Commission. Presently, we're still moving forward that.
And Larry, just to expand on that, the reason why those areas are before the Conservation Commission for approval, and you could, if you want to get a little more detail, is that we're not permitted to just dig and remove sediment wherever we feel like, even the city's own forces. So we have to get approvals before that happens. And then there's a reason why you selected those areas, correct?
Yes, yeah. These were some of the more severe issues. And as Anthony said, it would be great if we could just go out there and start, when you see some of the pictures, it's pretty obvious that there has to be stuff done, but the city just can't go out there and dig. They need to comply with the same regulations that any contractor would do. So, and that's why we're going through the steps. It sometimes takes longer than we hope, but we're following the process.
45 years ago.
45?
45.
Yeah, the Conservation Commission usually doesn't take that long, but this is something.
I'm on June Avenue, 18 years of flooding, and the water comes down June Avenue, shoots 5 feet in the air from the 2 storm drains in front of my house, down my driveway into my basement. I've called numerous times.
Yeah,
It's mental anguish is what it is.
Oh, no.
Years.
No, it's frustrating.
We understand that. There's a motion.
Can't think like this.
And you put in, I know you've called D.P.W, you put in the request for customer service, because that's important. If we're not there with you, we're not going to know that. That's very important information.
You're across town, you hear it rain, you have to run home to make sure your home is not flooding.
Yeah.
I pay taxes just like everybody else. It's so disheartening.
I have family who don't sleep at night. Is that worried?
No, I sit up
If the
and
basement,
wait.
if the drain in front of the basement door is going to be able to handle enough of the water.
Yeah, and we have pumps going from all different angles and sandbags and barricades. I don't know what more to do. I love where I live, but how much can people take?
Yeah, thank you. It's frustrating.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the location? I missed
June
it.
Avenue.
Why does the city keep giving permits out that I don't mind them going up, but when they start expanding and you're only like 5 feet away from the next property, where is that water gonna go? Look at County Street. They had one house there that was 2 elderly people for a long time. Now there's 3 homes there, and if you look at the house facing County Street, the driveway, okay, to the garage isn't just to the garage. It's on the side, it's further to the left. It's like a parking lot. Where's that water gonna go? It's gonna travel to these areas.
Yeah.
I can jump in on that.
But you know what? You don't care as long as you give out the permits and make the money. But how long does it take from that extra 1,000 or 2,000 that you're getting for that taxes to recoup and pay over $1 million? How long does it take to recoup?
Your concern is certainly heard, and the city has changed its drainage requirements. In 2017, the city updated its drainage manual. It hadn't been updated since 1983. It now requires every property to retain the 25-year storm on their property. And so all of the impervious surface that you're talking about for the 3 homes that were built on County Street on the corner of Strawberry Hill, I'm very familiar with that location, they have underground retention systems that were required to be put in for their building.
Even on my road, Sylvan Lane, there's a construction going on a house. There's a creek in back of there. Where's that water gonna go? To our homes, all in the Wolf Pit area. You guys are too lenient to give out these permits that fast. I've had it 45 years and we don't do a damn permit thing. Thank you. You know what? Take $2,000, $3,000 off our taxes, all the ones that get flooded. That's what you should do.
That's right.
Is Surrey Drive in this project?
Yes.
It's not there.
It's a friendly road.
It says Friendly Road, but that encompasses the Surrey Drive Saddle Road
Yeah,
area.
you'll see.
So you'll see areas just with these roads, but they're parts of much bigger areas.
Thank you so much.
So what is an underground retention area?
Yeah.
I live on Heather Lane, and we had major issues last summer as well. I mean, rivers going through our street. I went to your engineering department, I sat with them, I was showed the 10-year, the 20-year, the whatever drainage years of problems. I know for a fact there was a new drainage put in at Buckingham Place, which fed down to the river. The pipes were widened. They looked at the pipes coming out of Heather Lane. There's been all kinds of development done on Strawberry Hill, including people putting in pools, leveling their land, the water coming down to Heather Lane. Part of the problem was a drain that after the paving was done on Strawberry Hill, it was never fully, there was a catch, something for the paving that was never taken out. So that drain was not properly draining the water, and it was all coming down Heather Lane as literally a river. I was told that Buckingham was corrected, but to be able, I think it was Dwayne or somebody in engineering, admitted the pipe is way too narrow coming out of Heather Lane and Strawberry Hill, needs to be widened to accommodate the kind of water flowing. However, it wasn't in a budget. So it's better to have the homeowners pay the cost of repairing their property. And I've lived on that street for over 50 years. Things have been done to correct it, but since all this development all over town to get more and more and more taxes is being done, the infrastructure is not there to handle it. And that's a major problem, because these homes were built in the 1960s, when the street itself was half the size that it is now. And Dwayne and I, we talked about it, and where the water's coming from, everything from part of Walter Avenue, Katy Lane, Corey Lane, the extended Heather Lane is all coming down to a drain that's a couple of houses away from me.
And it's Drew, I think you're.
Drew, I'm sorry, it is Drew.
And,
absolutely.
Yes, that is an active project that they're working on. And
But I was
actually
told that
everything-
it wasn't an active project.
It's on the list.
Well, somehow it made it to a list without me being notified. I was told that this was that anytime I see problems like drains that need to be cleaned to notify him, but that it wasn't in a budget. So all of a sudden, I guess a budget got formed that we're now on.
We need to, there is some funding that there was a special capital appropriation that was done, when did you finish it? This December timeframe?
This was just, this was prior to December, correct? That I But I was told this would cost millions to do.
I'm not aware of that, but we definitely have it on the list, and it's definitely an active project that we're working on, and everything that, I concur with everything that you said.
How can I find out where that project is?
We can talk with Michelle after, and we can look at the list. And Drew is up at conservation right now also, and he will come down to this meeting after as well.
And we totally understand. I mean, this is straight across the board in every community I know I've worked in, villages, cities. Larry, I know you've done tons of municipal work too. I know.
Yeah, but I lived on that street for over 50 years. I've never seen the river. We have pictures of a river flowing with waves down the street. That has never, ever.
But this is why, and this is why we're here.
They're telling me it's a 10-year storm. They're telling me that it's a 20-year storm. They're telling me it's a 50. I mean, this happened twice.
Yeah.
There's definite problems with the development going on in this. Look at the stupid mall that they're building. Yes. It's outrageous that you're building a mall that's creating more water damage. And look at how many times it's overflowed. What are we going to wait for? People, I called my insurance company. They said they would come out and assess it. But my insurance is going to go up. So my insurance is going up, my taxes are going up. And look at that development over off of the one that's off of Route 7 connector there. How many apartment buildings are there? It's outrageous. We can't even fill the apartment buildings that we have now, Avalon. I used to work at Norton Systems for how many years? We never had the problems that that development has caused. Drainage, everything. It's all about the money coming into the city, and that's a problem. That's a definite problem. And I guarantee you this project is no way going to handle the problem. Drew told me it would be the amount of money it cost to go from Buckingham, which is half the distance that's going to cost to go from Heather Lane down there. I know, I went to him, we sat, he had charts all over the place. I said, let's just stop. I know what happened back with Buckingham. Let's not show me all these designs, because it's not taking me anywhere. The fact of the matter is you came out, and he actually measured the drain. And I said, so what, the pipe diameter versus the pipe diameter down here? When he told me, I said, so you have a major problem. I agree. So it's like you've got to dissect and go, they think they're going to bamboozle you with charts. It's not working. It's not working, and I'm sure everybody here has had even probably worse problems for years.
May I interject? Drew actually has Heather Lane on his list as a high priority. Heather Lane.
Well, it's nice that it's a high priority, but I doubt highly it's going to go anywhere. That's a start. That's more than I had before I showed up. But we shouldn't have to all go through this. You put a new development in, you should show the town, the residents, where that water is going. Because you've got drainage, you've got sewage, and it's not connecting properly. Here's a perfect example. The pipes are not right feeding into each other.
Yeah, it sounds like the city changed its drainage manual to accommodate for that, but I understand what you're saying. It also sounds like your project is on the list, and as I said before, there's going to be an engineer that's going to be looking at it, and I can...
But the water, in the meantime, you don't have the climate accommodating the weight.
Yeah, so...
I'm just waiting for the next storm.
No, I understand that, yeah. Sure.
There's no more 10-year storms anymore. We got
Right.
every year.
Well, they are just, yeah, we have a lot of them, right? So,
And we recognize that the existing infrastructure needs to be improved. But as far as the stormwater management on site, and they are required to uphold the city code, and the engineers up there do a good job at looking at what's required. So in theory, right, if every development controls their runoff or manages their stormwater properly, you wouldn't have that quote-unquote cumulative effect.
Well,
I mean, I get what you're saying. There's going to be more water.
What you told me is the pipes feeding into the Dog River are not even high enough anymore because you have water tables that are...
And this is why we're taking a fresh look, because you're right, there's a few things.
Exit 16 is a nightmare. I mean, cars are just, you don't have time to get out of the area when this kind of a problem exists. That is bad. Somebody's gonna get killed.
We're gonna look at all this.
I know, I thank you for looking into it, but we don't have time anymore. The city is developing faster than we can accommodate. And we residents have no other choice but to get the hell out of here, because you guys are listening, but you're not doing.
Yeah, but who's gonna buy your house if you...
Exactly.
Nobody wants your house.
Absolutely.
thank you. Okay.
So, and they're filling in wetlands. I mean, that's...
I identify very much with this woman who's listed on June Avenue and what she said. I moved here in 1981 and I've lived in the house. Our problems began in 1981. I too am in tears constantly. And last year, this fire department had to come, Norwalk Fire Department had to come to my house and turn off the electricity because the water was so high. But once they turned off the electricity and it sort of drained, because my oil company would not come as long as there was water. Nobody would come to help me, even to drain it. And okay, it ended up subsiding on its own, but nobody would come back to turn on my electricity. I sat in the dark and called I called Eversource, they said they don't do anything. I called everyone and I finally called back the fire department. They were nice enough to come back, and they were extremely nice. And they were nice enough to come back and turn just a part of my electricity on. But after the following week, when there was another storm, I have lost thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars through this flooding, through having to get a cleanup. Every single person, so I have to say, every time I've talked to Public Works since 1981, everybody was nice. I'm not saying anybody was not nice, but they've thrown up their hands because nobody knows what to do. And they say, when I come up with ideas, I say, well, what if you raise the street and so it doesn't pile up? They said the law says you're not allowed to divert water from my house to make a problem for somebody else's house.
Uncontrolled.
I've come up with every idea. Nobody knows how to solve the problem on Deepwood Lane. At least this woman's street is on there. Deepwood Lane is forever, I am in tears because nobody will help us. And everybody has been nice, but nobody knows what to do.
Yeah, that's like unbelievably frustrating.
I'm sorry.
It's very frustrating. I'm really sorry. I feel terrible. But I think the first step is like, let's get your property identified tonight, okay? You'll get on the list, and then we can evaluate it. I'm sure there's some things we can do to help.
Nobody knows what to do.
Well,
So this wonderful woman on Knollwood Road, where Deepwood and Knollwood, passed out a list of brochure, not a newspaper to everybody on Knollwood and Deepwood to come to this meeting. And that's why I'm here. And I met this woman as I walked in, and we both are in the same ballpark.
Well, we've got you, so at least we've got a couple of you. So make sure you fill them out. And the city really is taking a fresh look at this thing. And I can assure you that Anthony,
This
Lisa,
amazing
can I
man,
finish?
maybe
Excuse me,
he
just
can
let me
do
finish, okay?
something, but,
Can I finish?
do you mind
I let you
pointing
finish,
out
right?
Michelle? Do you mind pointing out Michelle?
Michelle's in the back.
Michelle, can you stand up?
Michelle, wait, wait.
Michelle Diaz.
Michelle knows me well.
Okay. So they are taking a fresh look at this thing, and they're convicted to make changes, and let me kind of go through what we're doing, right, and then our next steps, and then we're gonna open up for Q&A, all right, is that okay? Okay, great, all right, so let's just power through, we can do this. Okay, so this is, so as I said, these projects, the next five we're talking about, they're up at conservation right now, and we're taking a look at them. This is the area here, I know it's kind of hard to see, but it's kind of a broad area on there. And the red on there is like areas where we're going to be dredging. We talked about maintenance that's been required down there, and you can see in some of the pictures that we follow up with that with some maintenance, it will definitely increase the flow through the areas. Okay, so as I said, this is a picture for the Friendly Road area, and that's kind of a weird picture, but this is what is being used right now for conservation to kind of show them what they're going to do. And what we're trying to achieve is to provide, remove some sediment, but also to provide a mechanism for the city to go in and do some of the routine maintenance. It's been mentioned that you could just go out there and you should be able to maintain it, to keep it free, but you really need a permit to do that. And we're attempting to accomplish that within this existing current process. So you can see this is kind of a typical problem that we're dealing with, where we've got, let me see if I can get my forward over here.
Want me to point to it? Or just-
Yeah, Anthony's gonna help point to it. So you can see in this picture, you can see where the water is now, but you can also see the existing channel, but there's a lot of red lines there. That's kind of like showing where there's a lot of sediment that's been built up. And what's happened over time is the sediment builds up and it reduces the capacity of the drainage system. And although it may not look so bad right here, you know, when you start getting a lot of rain and stuff, it really has an impact, really decreasing the waterway opening, which is a fundamental of hydraulics. So this is what's happening right now. Conservation Committee, we're going to be hoping to widen these areas and loosen the sediment through the contract that the city has in place. This is the Hunter's Lane area, and it's a pretty big area in here. As you can see on there, it goes from Hunter's Lane, it crosses Otis, sorry. So it's a big area in there, and this whole drainage system along in here, again, is,
Actually, you know what, you want to just hit a quick point on the color coding for the
Sure.
legend?
Yep.
So the areas identified in blue, this is the channel, there's purple, there's red, and there's blue, but there's a legend down here that you can't see. But what the blue box, and what the blue color represents here, is a 0 to approximate 0 to 12 inches dredge, which is 0 to 12 inches removal of material in the channel. The red here and other locations is approximately 1 to 2 foot of sediment removal, right? Proposed, approximated.
Yep.
There's no way to know exactly how much, but it's an estimate. And the purple is 2 to 3 foot. So I mean that's a pretty significant amount. I mean that's 24 to 36 inches. So again, approximations, but it's more for illustrative purposes.
Okay, thanks. And so this is a picture of the project. And so, kind of like, so what are we achieving other than, you know, the removing the sediment, and why is that important? In this area in particular, we're trying to maintain a flow line so that the water will continue to flow. We've mentioned gravity, you know, water flows by gravity. I think Murphy mentioned that earlier. And that's what we're trying to achieve in some of these areas. This is the June Avenue area. Again, you can see the 0 to 12 inch of dredging, and then the larger dredging in the red on there. And yes. And this area is an area where we feel we're probably going to get some pretty significant improvement right now. Right now, there's an area in this drainage channel with a small pipe, and it has extreme amount of overgrowth in this area. You can see that you can barely see the waterway. Remember on the other pictures before, you could kind of see where the water was? And here you can barely see it, and there's a lot of overgrowth in this area. And you can see there's a very small pipe right here where this green is. And that pipe is really restricting flow in the area. And
Where's
so,
that located,
Just past Bow Street before you get to Kettle.
Okay, so that's way down, I'm at the bottom.
Yeah,
So-
that's all the way down.
Yeah.
but this is kind of indicative of June. There's all throughout June, there's
And everything's coming down to my street, down my driveway, at the bottom of the hill.
you're on the list, so it sounds like we're moving forward.
Yeah, no, I'm excited.
Okay, so should be some pretty good improvement in here, in this area, next area.
And an example of the improvement that you'd experience is similar to the county street, I'd say emergency work. I mean, that was indicative of, you take some sediment, remove some debris out, and you see almost an immediate benefit. And these aren't fancy, expensive, large pipes or superstructures. This is just from cleaning an open space that's full of dirt.
I called a couple of times after one of the storms, those back-to-back storms, and they said they'd come clean out. I wasn't home, my neighbors said they came, looked in, didn't clean up, and left. So I don't know if, why they didn't do it, but maybe it's a whole long project or whatever, and it's being addressed, so.
And there's a limitation on what they can remove. As I said, we're hoping to kind of get like a broader ability for D.P.W. to do some of those kind of emergency changes. Oh, sorry, sir.
Yes.
Hold on, sorry.
Bill Gary, Tonetta Circle. 3 questions. One is, where are you going to take the sediment that you remove? Where's it going to go? how long before it fills in again? And what are you gonna do for stream bank stabilization?
Those are great questions. The city, as maybe you heard earlier, has a contract for a contractor to remove the sediment. And that's,
The disposal is not included with that contract. It will be brought to the Public Works Center and disposed of through where we dispose all of our catch basin and debris under an existing contract. Oh, yes, that's a good point. Back in 2007 and 2008, the city stopped using road sand on its roadways in direct correlation to this. This is kind of a little bit of Groundhog Day. In 2007, we had a tremendous amount of rain, kind of akin to 2018. We had the same concerns come up. Some of the areas that were dredged then were identified as having a direct contribution of road sand from our snow plowing operations. So we have not been using road sand since that time period.
and so that will have a pretty big impact on the sediment that's built up. And then the last question was on how we make sure that up in wetlands right now, we're talking about that exact, what we're doing in areas to make sure that there's not erosion of the channels. So that's all going to be designed to make sure that you have stability in the channels. Sorry, ma'am, did you have another question?
Yeah, they were able to, no one is able to pay you guys, but they're not able to use the money to correct a lot of these problems. So where does that leave us?
So I'm actually free tonight, so they're not getting anything from me.
And one of the prior question was, a three-part question from the gentleman in the back. What his last question was, how long will it take to fill it again? I mean, now, you know, these are very site-specific.
Yeah, that's.
A range.
Yeah, we're really hoping that, you know, that the reduced salt, the sand will alleviate a lot. But we looked at the material on there, it's definitely sandy material. I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's not gonna fill up again. That's why we're trying to provide the capability to go back in there. But it's not gonna be like an overnight thing. And generally, from what we see, from my experience, it builds up over time. Aggradation and degradation are common terms that we use for sediment transport within waterways. So I would think that these will maintain their waterway opening for maybe 5 to 10 years, so for a pretty substantial amount of time.
One of the things on June Avenue, and I'm sitting here listening, and a lot of good points were made about permit and stuff like that, but a lot of that sediment, I'm not calling anyone out, on June Avenue is caused by the houses on Bow Street blowing their leaves and throwing the stuff in it. It's an open waterway. And honestly, some of the onus has to go on your neighbors, because there's only so much that we can do. And to answer your question about long-term, how we're gonna keep these things, is an education program about, hey, what you do in your backyard affects someone else's yard also. So that is a big part of this, is that these waterways, we haven't used sand since 2006, and someone's putting stuff in there, we're not. So that is a big part of this.
What about garbage? Garbage.
Exactly,
really,
yes.
That doesn't degrade, doesn't decompose.
I mean, that June Avenue drainage that drains Tea Kettle and all the way from Kendall School, it drains under through Tower Drive, and that whole waterway that we're about to dredge, if people do this, we'll be having the same conversation 5 years from now.
Yeah, I want all these things, and there's a lot of yard debris and stuff that was put, they should not have been put in the channel, but it has been. So vigilance, you know, we don't want to call our neighbors, but you see your neighbor, you know, dumping in the water or adjacent to it, don't be afraid to call D.P.W. Okay, ma'am.
This is all very good to have the discussion. It does seem like with Mr. Carr coming in, he will be able to coordinate staff that were well-meaning but maybe not coordinated in order to get this done. But what will your coordination be during your study with the Conservation Commission, the zoning commission, and also the redevelopment agency. And my second question is, what is your enforcement strategy? Because sometimes, as Mr. Torrey said, it's caused by people living or construction companies. And in order for this all to work, so we don't have to keep coming back here, are you planning to have a holistic management program that includes other departments, but also an enforcement strategy that's been sadly missing in this city on a consistent basis? There's been pockets of enforcement, but then it stops. So, and also an education program to help people understand what not to do in their own backyards and what to do, like planting vegetation, vegetative buffers, green infrastructure. These are things that other towns are doing that we're not doing consistently. We throw around the words, but we don't actually implement. So do you have any thoughts about an enforcement strategy?
I'd say we're not, at this point, we're not there yet. I mean, if you want to look at it from three perspectives, there's the evaluation phase, which is what we're basically in now, discovery. Then there's the education phase, as Mr. Torrey pointed out, and then later on there'll be an enforcement phase. I can't speak to the other departments yet, especially being here 2.5 months, but we would have to engage other departments as stakeholders and maybe be part of the steering committee when we actually perform the studies in the various areas. I mean, the steering committee is going to be a combination of DPW staff, maybe other departments, working with the consultant. But first, there's a lot of problems, so before we worry about the enforcement, we'd like to understand where the problems lie, the biggest problems. I'm going to say table the enforcement for now because we can't enforce what's not yet evaluated. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. I want to keep it focused, which is, like you said, coordinate the staff, coordinate the consultant, involve the other departments as needed, and that takes time. But it starts with public works. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in private properties, like Mr. Torrey said, that we can't control. And then every public works department across every community gets the slack. The pipes are too small. The pipes are clogged up. It's not all us, but we are willing to make the investment in the infrastructure to account for the fudge factor, the sediment getting in there from the private property. So, but we could only do so much of that at one time, right? So if everybody comes here, 50 complaints in 50 neighborhoods, where do you start first? You have X amount of funding, Y areas, where do you start?
Or health and safety.
Right, public safety and welfare is at the forefront, and that's why we're doing this. But I'd say it's the evaluation, the education, and but you're right, once we have all the pieces in place, or good understanding of the pieces, and we get further along the process, then absolutely, if we have to revisit the code, we'll revisit the code. Although the stormwater management for Norwalk is pretty robust, especially with the drainage manual that was revised. But matter of practicality, we can't be on site every time. We can't watch the contractor on private property every minute. It's not a perfect world, but we'll try to make it as good as we can. In time.
I'll forward you, I'm an enforcement professional in waste management, but an enforcement strategy, starting out with some obvious people that are dumping, make the fine help pay for some of the solution. Now, not after the study is done. Just a thought, and I will send you an email. Thank you.
Well, great, those are very comments. I think that the city certainly, with bringing Anthony in, giving him a bigger oversight role will help connect some of the dots. So, I mean, I think the mayor was very strategic in bringing Anthony in and broadening that role to deal with some of those same issues. Keeley Drive, again, that's pretty tough to see that one. You could go to wetlands to see it, but again, it's the same kind of thing. We're dealing with dredging certain areas, trying to get the flow through to maintain the water line in there. As you'll see from the next slide, Anthony, you can see out here. Again, so this is an area here where you can see that it would be difficult for water to be conveyed through that channel. So the work that we're trying to accomplish will be removing the debris, removing the sediment, widening the channel, making sure that we get flow through that. So it's the first part of, all these projects is kind of like the first step. And once we're able to get to see how the water is flowing through these areas, then when the engineering people come in, they're talking to the city, they'll be able to evaluate systems, much better. Right now, as you can imagine, it's pretty difficult to assess how to improve this thing, if you can imagine it without having all the debris in there. So in part of the engineering design, you need to evaluate where the existing water system is. Lloyd Road area here, again, you can see we've got some of the bigger dredgings in there, the 1 to 2, and then some of the minor ones, the little ones. Again, we're just trying to get flow to that area. We got a picture close up of it in here. And again, this one area doesn't look as bad, right? So you're not seeing all the branches and stuff in there, but you do see quite a bit of the sediment build up in there. And that really has an impact, has a pretty big impact on water flow. There's a lot of water that goes through this particular area. And you've lost quite a bit of your water opening in there. So, we're pretty confident that the dredging work that we've been doing there, you're going to see a pretty big improvement. Okay, plan future activities. And now, Anthony, you guys are tired of hearing me. Anyway, so put the mic down. Great.
So I'll keep it brief. I understand that the big question tonight is, when is my area going to get fixed? Understood, but I do want to take just a moment to highlight what we've done so far in my brief 2.5 months here, which is so short compared to how long Mr. Torrey and Ms. Burns have been here. The dredging of the 5 locations, just to give you a timeline of what we're doing, and then this is going to open it up to customer service and Q&A. But the dredging of the 5 locations, the approval is anticipated in June 2019, late May, early June. Obviously, one meeting is going on tonight. They may require an additional meeting after this, so that's why I say May, June. But by the end of June, we will have the approval secured from the Conservation Commission to dredge at those locations. The completion of work, we're estimating fall of 2019. Could go a little bit longer, depends how much sediment they find, but that's an approximation. Can't tell you right now if it's the beginning or end of fall, but it will be the fall. It certainly won't be next year, unless there's a seasonal restriction that the Conservation Committee places on the work. And that contract is open-ended for other areas. The dredging and heavy pipe cleaning contract. The bids are due back June 6th. We had extended the bid actually. There was a couple questions, but they were originally due May 30th, but we extended it an extra week. We're anticipating Common Council authorization in June of this year, next month. We anticipate work starting July of 2019. And this ties, obviously, the dredging and heavy pipe cleaning ties into the 5 location dredging contract, because you can't do that work until we get approval from the Conservation Commission. So the bid was put out and the permits were filed concurrently. And as you've heard tonight, we're in the process of retaining a consulting engineer to do an evaluation of citywide flooding. 14 consultants responded to our RFQ, which is short for Response for Qualifications. We shortlisted 4 consultants. Of the 4, we made a preliminary selection, which will be recommended to the Public Works Committee at the June 4th meeting. Once the Public Works Committee approves our recommendation, barring there's no questions or issues, that would be slated for the next Common Council meeting the Tuesday after that, so that would be the 11th. And again, these study areas will be prioritized, and I wrote this because it's important. Existing conditions, known problem areas, identified by city staff, but more importantly, residents. And from that, a risk matrix will be developed. Every consultant's going to do it a different way, so it's not a straight across the board thing. But we're going to identify, we're going to work with the consultant, that's the steering committee. We're going to steer them in the direction where they need to look, because we've been here longer than them, but they have a wealth of knowledge and resources, so we're going to combine that effort together. Lastly, these studies will provide recommendation for corrective measures, because from that study, there's going to be a table. It's going to say, okay, area 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's short-term fixes, here's some long-term fixes, and here's how much it's going to cost you for each fix. And we take that study, which we anticipate the first round of studies will be done by December 1st of this year. The reason for that is because the Public Works Department needs to begin submitting the capital project request to the Department of Finance. So there's a reason why that date was selected. We backed from that date, and that's why we had the interviews in May, unofficially selected the consultant, who will be revealed on June 4th at the Public Works Committee. But that study is going to be important, because it's going to give you a sense of dollars, of how much benefit you're going to get, how much bang for your buck. How many areas you're going to fix, how many areas won't you fix. And that's important. So that's full transparency. Everybody in this room, and then some, are more than welcome to be invited to that process. You will be. There'll be monthly public outreach meetings once the consultant gets on board. You can ask as many or as few questions as you like. The areas are not gonna be secret, there's gonna be full transparency. If your area is not on there, it's just that for this round it's not, but it will be. We have that list is active. Once we get in a more documented form, we'll circulate it. Right now, personally, I'm not totally comfortable circulating the list because it is in draft form, and I need to review it a little bit more with staff. But the consultant will develop a price tag for all these improvements and tell you how much benefit you're gonna get. And that's important when we sit down with the Department of Finance, when they say, well, why are you asking for $10 million? Well, look, here's our study. Nobody could say it's arbitrary. At least it's based on something, it's based on a qualified professional, and then we would circulate that, we'd give our recommendations, and it'll be up to the administration and common council to decide, because they are the ultimate approving authority, how much money gets allocated for future drainage improvements. I would guess, based on the study, because I would say the same thing if I was them, well, you're telling me it's $10 million, what's it based on? Here's the study. We have meetings and we walk them through the process, although they'll be briefed every month anyway at the Public Works Committee meetings. But that's important. I mean, those studies are going to give us a starting point. And it's nice that everyone's coming with the concerns and the issues. We want to hear them. But truthfully, when you have 60 issues, some overlap, some don't, it really takes time to digest all this information and feed it to the consultant and make sense of it. Because where you think one problem is, might be a problem somewhere else. And if you fix one area, you might be pushing the problem downstream. So these are analyses and iterations that the consultant will develop. And during these public improvement meetings, this is important too. There's going to be models that you're going to see on the screen from plan view, which is like a bird's eye view over a map, and also from a side view, where it's going to show water filling and spreading, and the consultant's going to calibrate and build a model that is reflective of your area. It's called a 2D model, two-dimensional model. So you see it, how far the water spreads, how deep it is, and if it doesn't accurately reflect the conditions of your neighborhood, the consultant's going to be here and you're going to say, that's not like what's experienced. I've seen consultants, they take that information, they calibrate the model, having been a consultant, and you change it to match what an intersection would look like under flooding conditions based on your input, not mine, and certainly not staff's. So I think that's important. You're going to be included throughout this whole process. And I know that not all areas will be included in the first round because there's only so much money to do so. So I just want to manage that expectation. If we have to adjust the areas along the way, sure, because the public is part of the steering committee. It's not just the commissioner, or the chief, or the principal engineer, or the superintendent of operations, and it's not just the mayor, it's everybody. But the leadership is going to rely on us because they're not engineers, although some may be, but they're going to rely on staff recommendations. What do you think, and why? And that's important. And I think a lot of times municipalities, they don't have a master plan per se for a storm sewer. So you have to go and evaluate it globally, and then you take pieces out. Otherwise, it's just arbitrary at that point. And every municipality experiences the same thing. You have so much money, you have all these trouble areas. Where do you go? Usually where you get the most complaints. But that's what we're trying to avoid here. So yeah, that's a key date though, December 1st. Because we will have a final draft in our hand, reviewed, approved by city staff, and then we can begin the discussions with the Department of Finance.
So what happens if your street is not in one of those 5 zones?
We could tell you to the extent either A, it's being evaluated, but it's medium priority. And again, the priority list is going to be determined from a risk matrix, which is going to be all the input coming from here. It's not going to be certainly what I tell them to do.
Right. What does the pink represent on the grid, on the table? You said yellow, but you didn't mention the pink.
Yellow, pink.
On the Excel.
Oh, sorry.
On the chart.
Okay.
What's that category?
Potential to resolve the issue with in-house resources. So that would not have to go to the drainage study. It may be resolved just with in-house resources, particularly a maintenance resource from operations division.
And engineering staff.
Thank you.
Working together. Larry, before I turn it over to you.
Would you be able to comment on the plans for Woodward Avenue? I saw it was on the list, but is there any information as how to proceed with that?
It is one of the highest priorities. And it has been previously studied in another drainage study. I believe CDM did the drainage study previously It was a really, back then, it was a very expensive project. So we'll have to look and see if there's any other tools in the toolbox, as some of the folks here have talked about, that can now be applied. It's about, 10 years later, we'll be looking at this again, but it'll be a combination of using in-house resources and then being part of a large drainage study. So there's different problems in the Woodward area.
In the past, I've lived there 20 years, and over the past year, I've had so much more flooding than any of the prior 20 years.
Right.
And also I noticed the water is coming not from the direction of the water, but
Yeah.
from Woodward. So
Right.
probably something has changed.
Yes. We have all your service requests logged in here.
Yes, ma'am.
In the back here?
Yes, please.
Olmsted Place, 35, 40-year flood victims, I guess, and in recent years, we did have work done, a combination of pipe work and drainage work and actually dredging a pond, which I'm not sure how much good that did. But just as an observation, I would say, like, I'm not an engineer, but I agree with, I came in late, but I think a lot of people spoke about the fact that the city's infrastructure probably cannot take too much more development, or even what's on the table now. These pipes just, are not the right size. We don't have enough of them. We also don't have the staff or the funds to maintain them. And I know in our case on Olmsted and south in East Norwalk, we know that when the pipes get maintained, we tend not to flood. When the pipes are not maintained and cleared, we flood. And we too get, a foot of water in the house, the fire department shutting down our electricity, white caps coming through our yards with the rivers, flowing through. And that's mostly due to a lack of maintenance. And I would also say that we've observed that the city doesn't respond to rain and flooding in the way that it does snow. And maybe we should look at it that way, because most of these big rain events are predicted, so you have enough time to react. And if you treated rainstorms for all of us flood victims in the way that you treat snow as a public safety and a service to the community, maybe you could be more proactive in terms of going to there's probably 20 areas in the city where maintenance is a real concern. So if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days or a week's notice on major rain, then you guys could dispatch the crews, get out there, clean the catch basins, clean, all of the vaults and everything, and that would definitely make a difference. I also want to say, with the new studies that you're funding, I hope you're not tossing out the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on the price studies. I know when we went through our flooding from Olmsted and Lockwood and Buckingham and that whole area, a lot of money was spent with Ty and Bond and other engineers who studied it. So, we shouldn't be recreating the wheel. We should be looking at those studies and understanding those systems that they've already documented going forward. That's it. I may have more.
No problem. And just 2 quick things. The last study that I reviewed here was the Malone and McBroom study, but that was from 2012, 2013. And as we've all discussed tonight, climate's changed, weather conditions changed. That's one reason why I personally want to take a fresh look at it. Staff recommended the same thing as well. 2, any consultant that comes in, having been one, would like to start off fresh with their model, with their information, with their data. But you're right, the other study shouldn't be discarded and become a paperweight completely. There is information in there, whether it's observations, historic information, that they can be used to supplement that. So it would be supplemental at best, but if I was any consultant, I wouldn't trust it, even if it's 100% correct, because there's a sense of responsibility that the consultant has. So I hear you on that. And as far as the hot spot, you're right, every municipality has hot spots and trouble spots before each storm to go out and send crews to clean. And Chris, I believe we do that.
We have 28 that we check any kind of predicted rain. And one thing to say is, if you got flooded out last June 26th or September 26th or October 2nd, the whole state got flooded out. And honestly, right there was probably 4,000 hotspots, because I live in Oriole Drive. I don't get flooding. I got flooding on those 3 dates. So there's flooding when you're getting flooded at a 10-year storm. That's a problem, and we as maintenance staff should be out there maintaining that so you don't. But if you're getting flooded on a 25-year storm, everyone's going to get flooded on a 25-year storm.
That doesn't make it right. That does not make it right. right, that doesn't mean that we have to deal with it.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm
It just-
saying it's what it is.
It is.
Here is also, our street got repaved, and I swear it wasn't paved properly, because this was the first major storm, and in all the years I've lived here, they were looking at that too and swearing that the
crown-
paving was done properly.
So-
However, I know there were neighbors that were home during that paving, and they have specifically told me, whether it happened or not, I don't know, that they told the contractors to bend the road slightly. I can't verify that was done. But I know for a fact in the street that I lived in, we've had many 10, 20, we have never, ever had rivers flowing down our street. So I don't care if the whole state, obviously, there's a lot of contributing factors, including the development that is going on, which is just not being addressed. You can't tell me, we can't go and verify that there's catch basins below homes. That's a great idea, but who's to say that those basins are gonna be maintained properly in the future either? I mean, you can't take properties that never had houses and build condos on them and expect drainage to be proper. It's just years and years, it's common sense to all of us, and yet you're hiring engineers to evaluate. I mean, there's more tax money going towards something that's common sense.
But if we didn't hire the engineers,
Yeah, but you're just.
how can we make a gainful decision where to start?
Service to all of us. We want action. We know every time we come, there's more engineers, there's more city employees.
I understand a study of a study of a study.
Yes,
But
yes.
I could tell you that the thing I hate is paralysis by analysis, where you look at something, you dissect something, even as a licensed engineer, there's times when you could look and evaluate, but you have to do something. So you're right, the study's nice. I think it'll give people some sense of comfort, but you're right, you want to see machines out there, you want to see contractors out there, and that's what we're driving towards. That's the best answer I could.
We've had people come out, but still Drew admitted that unless you call when you think that there's drain problems in your neighborhood, there is not a maintenance program in this town. You don't even know, I have a drainage pipe in my backyard, he didn't even know about it. He can't find a chart that has that. That was, and I know, I've lived in the neighborhood, that was put in the 60s. Yet the city doesn't even know that. I mean, there's just common sense things.
And that's true.
And I love having charts, but it's not doing me any good.
But there's a lot of plans that we have for record drawings, and I can tell you this from working in other municipalities.
Yeah, but the plans have been-
Not every pipe gets on there. It's just, unfortunately, these are the mistakes of the past that we have to now correct. And I
We're
understand.
having change in management, like a lot of companies have, but we're not moving forward. We're talking. At least we are talking, but yet let's make.
And I consider this the first step moving forward. It's in its infancy stages, but having the Public Works Committee involved and committing to the study, it's some progress. And the County Street, the William Street, you can't say there's been none. I understand it's
No,
not.
I agree.
I understand it's not moving as
Some of
fast as you'd
them
like.
are
I totally get that.
mice.
And I don't disagree. I'd want it to move quicker too. We're trying.
Yeah, that's a good point. The construction's moving faster than we are moving. Why?
Well, they have more resources. They have more people.
But then let's stop it. Let's put our resources to where we need to right now, rather than keep on the development. I just couldn't believe what's on that Willard Road, is it? That development? Where, what's it called? I don't know what the name of it is. It's right off the Route 7 connector on the right.
Glover.
Glover. What the hell is that? It's horrendous looking. It's condominiums or apartments. Was there any ever evaluation? I mean, it's horrendous, and yet it's going up in no time. It's going up in no time. What's the how could it be constructed properly?
But that's how
And yet the
it's
cities-
what we're talking about here.
No, it's all part of it. It's all part of it. You wait for the flooding over there, and then now the engineers are gonna move over there, or they're gonna move over here, they're gonna do studies. Let's get, at least you're moving, you have plans, that's nice.
Right, and if we didn't do this study, we would certainly be criticized for not giving it a good, hard look and
Well,
taking.
Drew admitted
right?
this study was done back when, but
Oh,
it was
which
stopped.
one?
It was stopped.
The
It
one-
was stopped, all it did was Buckingham Place, and it stopped.
I don't disagree with anything you said. I completely understand. I do.
I bet you like to hear something nice right now.
It would be good.
I was at the bank today, and Nancy said to me, "Where are you going tonight?" And I told her, and she said, "Oh, they're doing a marvelous job. So so had a mess for years, and they've been over there, and they cleaned it all out, and it's so much better. She's in seventh heaven.
Thank
Make
you.
you feel good. We're
That
glad
did- that
you're
did.
here. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
There is a drainage, I believe, that starts at the old ball field, where the band practices. And
Andrews?
Andrews Field. And is underground until it goes under Route 1 and then becomes an open drainage after that. And I'm wondering, is that part of the Finley Road project?
I'll defer to.
Yes and no.
Right.
It is, in the sense that that drains to Friendly Pond.
Yes.
We have done the pipe cleaning from the wetlands to the county mall. It goes back underground where the Midas or the muffler
Yes, yeah.
place is. It goes
Right.
under there, and then I think that's behind Smitty Shelf.
Right.
It runs down under Saddle Road. I know what you're talking about, but yes, we've cleaned up to that. That is part of the
Parallel with low VAT.
that is part of the dredging.
Okay,
yes.
well, okay, because that stream goes right through the middle of my property, open, and when it rains, it becomes a raging torrent, so.
Are you the person with the chickens?
Huh?
Are you the person with the chickens?
No, I have no.
You sure?
Is there?
What was your address, just so?
65 Saddle Road.
Okay.
For 40 years, we have not been able to develop or utilize one half of our property.
Yeah, is it the greenhouse? It's like you had the fence that was kind of over the top of the water?
Yes.
Yes. I'm very familiar, very familiar. But yeah, yes, that is part of it. It's not part of it to put a pipe there. It still can be open, but yes, it will be usable, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to clarify something that this woman up in front asked about Woodward Avenue, because it was hard to hear. Were you saying that there was a study done 10 years ago, but it was too expensive to correct, so it hasn't been corrected? I mean, if that's the case, do you think it got less expensive over the last 10 years? I mean, you know, I'm just, you know, that's a huge concern. If you thought it was expensive 10 years ago, it didn't get any cheaper, the problem's just gotten worse. So, you know.
On today's dollars, I'm sure it's more expensive. Escalation.
So,
But I'm not sure which study. Is this the Malone McBroom study, or is this a different?
It was a subset from CDM Smith. But when I was speaking with women up here about Woodward, there are different issues in the Woodward area. Some of it's different from when the study was last conducted. What you mentioned about how the water's been coming around in a different direction, that's kind of a newer thing. That would be addressed when we add additional drainage, along with paving the road. So there's different techniques that we're going to be solving problems there. But Woodward, because there is a low-lying pump station there in the Lawrence Street area, that's a stormwater pump station. And that, to increase the capacity of that stormwater pump station, was a challenge back when that study was last done. So we're hopefully, with the new drainage consultant coming on board, hopefully gonna have another set of eyes. Maybe there's a different solution to one that actually was expensive and it also had some challenges as far as being able to be actually implemented at a technical level.
because I've mentioned this before, I mean, right where you're talking on Woodward and Lawrence, that area is flooded, that cuts off 3 complete neighborhoods. And you cannot either get out or get in. And that's a lot of people. That's not just like 1, 10 houses, it's hundreds of houses. And that's, you know, it's not only a health hazard, you know, but it's a safety issue. Yeah, it's a safety issue. People can't get out, there's an emergency.
It's a very low area, and there is that stormwater pump station in there that would need to be a capacity increase.
Yes.
Is Burlington Court or Burlington Drive on these lists? Lake Street?
Burlington, it has been before, but what else we call Burlington?
I know don't see Burlington.
No, but sometimes we
Early.
call it something else.
Is it a subset of a bigger area?
Carlin Street, it's downstream of the Friendly.
It backs up to Woods Pond.
Yep.
Woods Pond is on the other end, Lake Street, extension where that private road is. There's all that underground piping that ends at Woods Pond and then undergrounds into Cannon Street.
Yeah, I
That's
know,
further down.
yeah, there was a significant amount of cleaning that was done and studied in that area. I just can't recall the specifics offhand. But just, did you fill out a?
I did.
Then we'll make sure that we'll just double check.
Thank you.
Okay, one more, and then we'll move on, and then we'll get to the Q&A slide.
First, thank you for taking the time to listen to the group. I don't believe that our property is on the list. However, it has been a growing concern for us. We live behind Oak Hills Golf Course on North Taylor Avenue, and we have a flooding issue. Fortunately, it's easily fixed. The problem is behind our home, between ours and the golf course, is wetlands. Back before, I think, wetlands was even really created, there was a man-made bog, which has continued over the years, increased sediment. Partially, actually significantly, since a lot of the enhancements have been made to the Oak Hills Golf Course with their new parking lot area, which has resulted, again, the increase in sediment, which has caused flooding. When we bought the property back in 2010, it was not in a flood zone, and had it had been an issue, we would have easily raised the property when we built it, but it wasn't an issue. And since then, over the past few years, we've had 4 feet of water in our basement for twice a year, every year. And we've been told that the property behind us, the wetlands, while it's owned by the city, is being leased by Oak Hills. And while we've learned through our research and our talking to various different people that it's supposed to be maintained, that the bog or pond, whatever we want to call it, is supposed to be maintained. The city says it's the golf course's responsibility. The golf course says that it's the city's responsibility. And then we were told that shame on us for building a house that's so low because we're bound to get flooding. And that's what the golf course told us. So we just need somebody to remove that sediment, and it'll be a non-issue for us.
If you filled out with your address,
I
know
did.
exactly what you're talking about, and the city maintained that probably prior. The last time we were there was probably prior, I'm guessing, 2010. It's right where the golf course drainage exits, and then it ends up down at Gillies. We clean that whole waterway. That's the kind of thing that we encourage folks to call customer service, because it may not be back on our list again, but that is not something that would be very difficult to address, and we have this done before.
We'll do ourselves. We let us. But my mother-in-law, well, this has been an ongoing problem. Just recently, they increased the value of our home by almost $250,000.
Yes.
And so now our taxes have increased significantly. And again, we've been out of our pocket for thousands and thousands of dollars getting that recovery. And the fire station wouldn't even come and help us when I had 4 feet in my basement and couldn't do anything. And so it's just been very frustrating, and I know that the whole group is very frustrated. So thank you, and we'll definitely follow up to see if it's a very small fix and it will significantly impact my life.
Right,
So
those
thank
are
you.
the things that we're talking about, is that cost benefit, right? That almost costs a very insignificant amount of money, converted, labor to money, but would be a great benefit. And those are the things we're going to look for. So there's going to be things in the study that might be prioritized, and I was speaking with staff about this earlier, that are, I guess, low-hanging fruit, if you want to call it that will easy fix, great benefit, might go up a little bit higher on the list because we could get it done quicker and do more of those. So it's going to be a working iteration with the consultant, because your problem is just as important as everybody else's. Right?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yes.
Just a quick question about the wetlands. This woman mentioned that the city was to be maintaining the wetlands, and they haven't been, and blah, 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 what happened after that. Does the city have some part in maintaining wetlands?
I mean, I'm not aware of the relationship between, is this general or specific to the golf, to the bog? because that's something that I feel
What did you
comfortable-
say about the city maintaining the wetlands?
There was conflict as to who was supposed to be responsible for maintaining the wetlands. We've been told that the golf course that's leasing it is responsible, and then the golf course says that it's the city and they own it, so they're responsible.
I didn't know the city had any involvement with maintaining wetlands.
I think that the terminology would be the water course, that is conveying the water from the golf course and then eventually goes down to Gillies Lane. There's a natural water course there, and from time to time.
It's man-made. There's a difference between natural and man-made trout.
Okay, so the water course that I'm familiar with there, where it outlets from the Oak Hills Golf Course, which it kind of outlets and daylights with a head wall behind some homes, which is, I'm guessing, in the vicinity of where your home is. That's a water course from there. It's not a pipe. And from time to time, like Chris pointed out earlier, when people start blowing the debris and leaves and sticks, and it can cause the water not to flow. And then when the water comes out the pipe from the golf course with some sediments and things from the golf course, because it can't flow freely through down to where it needs to go, you know, that sediment then starts to accumulate in pockets and then causes some localized flooding. So it's very important for the homeowners or people where we can't see these things to alert the city for the water courses that the city maintains. The city does not maintain every water course though, so
Yeah.
you know, I just don't want to put that out there that not every location is.
The reason I was asking is that the wetlands that existed on my property and became wet and dried up and became, has now taken over half the property, and that's why we're on your list, because the water has nowhere to go, and I'm concerned about the amount of my property that's being claimed by what one of the people in, I think, the Conservation Department called a pond. I said, wait, it's not a pond, although it looks like one.
In October of '69, we got the tidal wetland bill passed in Connecticut, and we worked on it here in North. And then after that, they passed an inland wetlands bill. And at that time, they mapped all of the wetlands. You must have that.
Yes, and what this woman speaking on Birchside is Conservation is the regulatory authority for the inland wetland regulated activities. And that's why the dredging permits that were shown for the 5 areas in the presentation tonight are up at the Conservation Commission, who is the regulatory agency for the inland wetlands.
We get some question and answer on this.
I thought we were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Supposed to be calling people.
Can I see the next slide, please? Okay, so I know we went over this earlier, but how to contact us. Customer services phone number is up there. For those who can't see it, 203-854-3200. We also have an app that you could download via the App Store for iPhone or Android. Ms. Diaz will explain a little bit more about this, but I think it's click and request is the name of the app. And you can go and take pictures real time as you see things. We'll receive that feedback. You can do it from your desktop as well. You can do it the old-fashioned way. You can take a picture, send us an email. You might find my email address, but I'm going to forward it to customer service because they're going to log this information. I'm sorry.
So, click and request is an application that you can get. You can submit your own requests to customer service, and then it automatically goes to the proper department. So, you can find it at norwalkct.org, and there's you can either click on one of those, whether you have an iPhone or an Android, or you can just go online and submit it on the computer too. So, but if you want to just search it on your like your Google Marketplace or your
Or the App Store for iPhone.
App Store, You just put in Norwalk, Connecticut, click and request, and then you can download the app, and it's so easy. It'll geocode you, and you can take a picture of your situation so that, you know, instead of saying, can you send an engineer when it rains, we already have the picture so that they can, you know, base their estimate on the picture.
Right, and the geocode will give customer service your location. So whether you're by your house or in the street, they'll know exactly where you are.
Is this specific, I assume this is not specifically for flooding, what sorts of things is this supposed to be for customer service?
It's for anything, so like, not just for flood, I mean, flood is only flooding, there's also garbage, recycling, garbage.
Trash and litter, tree limbs fall on the street, anything that poses a public safety hazard, street light outages, I imagine, damaged curb, they're pre-populated on there, correct? So when you go to the pull down, there's a list of, I guess, common complaints and items that most public works agencies do receive. But can you put in, if let's just say nothing's on the list, can you put in other? And
then we see it the following day. So let's say you put it at 2 a.m., you know, whatever's going on is at 2 a.m. You put it on the next business day, you know, at 8 a.m. We're going through them so that if, let's say, it went to the wrong person, we'll switch it over to the right person. So it doesn't get lost, and we're always looking through these service requests to make sure that it gets to the right person.
And even if the city is not the responsible entity, so if there's a traffic signal out that the city's not responsible for on a state road, but you use the app, it knows by your geolocated location to then submit that directly to the state of Connecticut versus, so it's very quick. It's, you're open 24/7. It's great to have that feedback from you all, and then you can also track on the app the status of your request. And I think that's a more dynamic feedback loop than having to call back or wait for a call.
And if they put the request in, if the resident or the public puts the request in from the desktop, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the desktop or the phone, where they could track their service request, so they'll get real-time status updates if they do which one?
Either it'll send you an email if it was received or not. To be honest with you, those updates are a little generic, so I know people have used it and they had a generic response from the request. But that's not, that's the system just sending you to notify that we received it, but it's not an actual response from us. So we will, if you leave an email or a phone number, we will call you or we will email you back directly from our customer service email if it needs a response.
Which you get from public works staff or any of the city staff, correct?
Yes.
The point is that you're not going to send into cyberspace, not get a response, and be the angry resident that calls and says, I tried calling you 3 times, I submitted 3 requests. Could happen, I'm not going to say it's not, but we do get, I can tell you from the municipalities I've worked in, this is the 4th one, none of them had a customer service module. It was always the administrative assistant for every department, basically taking the call, logging it, emailing it, and then having a follow-up. So I have to say that the implementation of customer service is truly something that the residents should take advantage of, use to its full potential, and be happy with it, because it's no village or town or city I've worked in has that customer service. So take advantage of it.
It's great. You're absolutely right.
Take advantage of it, if anything.
It's much more quick. It's much quicker. The next day.
Right, so it's like the old days, right, when you'd call Public Works, it depends what mood you get on. If it's a Friday, we answer the phone.
Now they're great. They're very nice.
Are we ready for another question?
That's it, we're going to have to move the slide. We're in a Q&A right now.
All right, on regulations, when properties higher than yours and they have walls and drainage onto your property, is that allowed? Or, the reason why I'm asking, because if I try to create a solution, I want to know what's compulsory, what's fair and, and usual. Because water draining onto mine, do I have the right to let the water flow past? That's the question.
You do have the right to, you'll see this.
Can you repeat the question so we can all hear the?
Yeah, I want to know the legality of, I bought a property built in 1960. It has walls with weep holes, and it drains on, a higher property drains onto ours. But our property is a little higher than a property behind us. Do I have the right to create a French drain, let the water keep going?
The short answer is yes, as long as you're in compliance with the regulations. You have to manage your stormwater appropriately, but that's not to say that you have to control or keep every drop of water on your property. As long as you're not making, they say, existing conditions, as long as you're not making a problem or making a problem worse,
Right.
which is what we would evaluate, then it's permitted. Because people do have a right, I know the question comes up about the development and who's allowed to build what, and they shouldn't be. That's a building, zoning, and planning tutorial. That's more of their wheelhouse, but I can tell you, if a developer is proposing something responsible and goes through the chain in public works and engineering, and they do meticulously review plans and documents, they have a responsibility to not make anything worse. Now, I know people are going to differ. They do have an as-of right to develop. I mean, if there's existing storm sewer in the street and existing sanitary sewer in the street, they have an as-of right to tie into our storm sewer. That is why the infrastructure is there. However, if they're going to add sewage and they're going to add stormwater, then yes, many municipalities, including Norwalk, requires the developer to increase pipe sizes, replace this catch basin, go further downstream, because you're right, they shouldn't be worried about the immediate vicinity. If they're putting more sewage from a building into their sewer main, it shouldn't be they walk away from it. They have to evaluate it, flow monitor in manholes downstream, see if they're adding to the problem, and make the pipes bigger if they need to. And that might go on for thousands of feet.
But who enforces that? Because even in East Norwalk, we have a recent case where you have a homeowner who's permitted and water's draining onto another property. And I know this homeowner was told it's a civil matter. The city doesn't enforce it. They're not going to come out and do anything about the one homeowner who's putting water onto another homeowner. That's one question. And then the other part is the city doesn't do anything about the illegal hookups of the stormwater into the sanitary lines either. And so there's no enforcement of that. That's why a lot of flood victims, I don't know if they talked about it earlier, but people are getting sewage back into their houses too. So from an enforcement and a compliance point of view, what is the city doing?
Well, an inflow and infiltration plan would have to be developed and evaluated, and you're right. From going through these studies with the storm sewer evaluation, we could see if there's illegal connections into the storm sewer. We would most likely give the owner notice as courtesy, right? You don't want to block their sewer up, their sanitary sewer up. But if they didn't comply after X amount of days, yes, their lateral will be cut and capped, and then they, but that's the last resort, because now when you start getting into punitive measures like that, it becomes, you're creating another public health and safety issue.
My next question is, the road was built, the driveway was made, then the road was elevated, and now the road is higher than the driveway. Part of the runoff doesn't go into, it goes right down the driveway. Is the city responsible for correcting that, or that's a private problem?
It depends if it was a pre-existing condition or not. I mean,
the road was just when you repave.
If the city repaves and creates or exacerbates an issue, I can assure you we correct it.
Okay,
we fix it.
Raise that as a question and a problem to the city.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right,
no question.
And another question.
Last question.
20 years ago, I read.
I've been waiting for a long time, and I put it up.
He saved his for the end, though.
I did.
In fairness.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay, one more question, and then
all right,
respectfully, we should move on.
Will you guys send out people to evaluate and make not saying make a recommendation or give advice, but have an opinion
regarding
water,
drainage problems?
Yes, that's part of the study. There would be field work involved with that. It won't just be engineers behind a computer. There's going to be, yes, absolutely. From here on in, there'll be monthly meetings. The consultant will be different next month, different face, but there'll be monthly meetings, and everyone will see the progress, and it'll be as transparent as we can be.
We don't have to provide our own drainage on our own property.
I've been there since '84.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, yes, sir.
Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to say I'm really appreciative of the staff and you and others targeting certain areas. That's really great. What I wanted to just request is in your any RFPs related to anything to do with drainage and planning and implementation, could you please include and make sure the companies or companies you hire that they have the ability to look at green infrastructure alternatives?
That was discussed during the interviews.
I was a member of the Connecticut Green Building Council. I was a member of the Rebuild by Design plan in Bridgeport, where we looked all the way upstream. Everybody lives downstream from somebody, but there's people upstream, where we looked at vegetation, green roofs, not with trees, but with sedum and things that absorb the water, that we have these around in some of the parking lots because they are less expensive at times than using traditional undergrounding.
At times, and they do require maintenance too, and space. There's pros and cons to them, but yes, you're right. Green infrastructure, low impact development techniques were discussed during the
last thing I just wanted to say, I'm a member of the Mayor's Water Quality Committee. We have to look at the quantity and the quality.
Correct.
Some of these green infrastructure do dual duties.
Right, they're mostly water quality with some quantity benefit.
No, they handle the quantity because they absorb and release slower. They reduce the temperature going into our harbor, and we have a multi-million-dollar, shellfish industry, and we have a lot of things that we should be concerned with. If we can get quantity and quality, it's a no-brainer. So I just ask that we just don't all run to dig up things.
I understand, putting bigger pipes in. I know.
No, sometimes that helps too.
That's going to be
a mixture.
A technique.
It's a mixture, but
Yes,
I please ask that because I rarely, if ever, hear anyone speaking the phrase but myself. And I know Ms. Burns now is talking about it, but when I've spoken at certain committee meetings, but can they please include in the implementation alternatives, green infrastructure? It's not new science, it's old engineering. Thank you.
It definitely has its place, I agree with you.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I'm here representing a Norwalk business. I'm from New Kitchens on Water Street. I know most people are here are residential, but is Water Street part of this storm drainage project? Because Water Street's been flooding for decades. I mean, we flood a full moon, high tide. We flood with 2 or 3 feet of water, and this is a serious public safety issue. We step outside of our business to try to stop people from driving down the road. And it's not just rainwater, that's salt water. That ruins people's cars. People get stuck. We've had employees of ours who are volunteer firefighters for the town of Bedford go down to see and check people in their cars to make sure that they're okay. I also live in South Norwalk, and I was walking my dog in about 6 months ago when it flooded, and I saw 2 workers from the Department of Public Works standing there and laughing at people driving into the flood. And it pains me to say that. It's very upsetting. But has this been addressed? I mean, I know they regraded the road a couple of years ago. That didn't seem to do anything. And then when they raised the intersection at Day Street and Raymond, that made the problem a lot worse.
My first 3 days here, Mr. Torrey took me out during a rainstorm to Water Street, so I've seen a little bit of the flooding there. Correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of that flooding is tidally influenced, right? So it's if I misspeak, let me know. It's a low-lying area, you have the pipes on the ground, right? So you have the ocean, tidal area, this high, your pipes are this high, the water's backing up, surcharging, whatever fancy term you want to use for it, and the water can't get out from the rest of the storm sewer. So you have a couple things going on there. You have the tidal water body, you have low-lying areas, you could put a 12-inch pipe or an 80-inch pipe there. Then it wouldn't make a difference if that pipe's on the water. So there's a 90-inch pipe down Water Street. Unfortunately, this predates us. I would say, and when the consultant looks at this, because that is a big area, and it is being considered. I mean, you've been combating Water Street for forever, I mean, right? I mean, it's been a long-standing issue, or is this a newer issue?
I believe Water Street would need to be addressed under more of a coastal resiliency project than the drainage study. It's a little bit of a different scope. Because it's not a conveyance issue. I mean, the road is too low for the water level for the tides. Certainly in the tides where you have the rain and and, you know, the stronger higher tides like the new moons or the no moons, Water Street will flood because just of its pure elevation. That's why everything on Water Street and in those adjacent neighborhoods that are in the flood zone have to be built above the floodplain elevation.
So when they regraded the road a couple of years ago and repaved, that was supposed to help with the flooding. When we're talking about development, I understand that development of buildings, you're saying in 2017 they have to accommodate, but was that not considered in terms of flooding? How raising the next intersection up 6 feet would back up the rest of Water Street? Because the problem's gotten significantly worse in the past 8 to 12 months since that project was finished.
Well, that project wasn't finished that long ago, so it hasn't been.
I live on Day Street. I was there when they finished the project. They did it when I moved in. They were starting it when I moved in a year and a half ago. So.
When you say finished, contractor's gone,
Yeah.
project's completed?
And the problem's gotten significantly worse since they were. I mean, they raised the road 6 feet.
Again, in this past year, in 2018, there were 3 storms in the city that exceeded 100-year storm event in size. So I don't believe that the raising of the intersection at Raymond and Day to provide just a dry egress did anything to exacerbate the tidal flooding in the Water Street, South Norwalk area. That's why it's called Water Street.
Exactly.
The one thing I do want to encourage.
Talking about development, I just want to say with Water Street and Day and Raymond, when the city and the state were considering that project from day one, a lot of people spoke out against rebuilding in that location because of the rising tide, because of the problem that's down there. And just common sense would tell you, if you have to raise an entire intersection 6 feet to accommodate dry egress, you shouldn't be putting housing and cars and people where you're about to build. Everything should have been moved back. The discussion was had for 5 years going into the Trinity and Washington Village project, and then it was just ignored. The egress coming out, instead of taking the park there was already a route to exit from there. It was called Raymond Street, the street as it existed. So I just think, I'm not an engineer, but just from a topographical point of view, I don't understand how that could not impact Water Street with what they did on Day and Water. I mean, on Day and Raymond. And, you know, I just want to remind you guys again too, when even on Water Street, when you're talking about flooding, please keep in mind the public health impacts of this, because it's not rainwater. You know, I see these big floods go out in the city and people let their kids go out and run around in the puddles like we did as kids. This is not that water. You're talking about animal feces and motor oil and antifreeze and you know, dead animal parts and whatever other contaminants are in the water. And the people at the golf course with pesticides and herbicides. And not to mention with the hookups that are done with the city sewer, many flood victims get raw sewage backing up into their property. So the water that's impacting private properties is contaminated, it's filthy, and it's a public health issue. It's not just a quality of life issue by having, you know, to replace your property. So please keep that in mind.
I do not dispute that. I completely agree.
And Mr. Davidson wanted to make a comment.
Yes.
I just wanted to make some comments as a citizen, and I'm not affected by the flooding. And I'm speaking as an individual and not as a member of any commission or board. 2 years ago, the city of Norwalk properly allocated about $140 million to the rebuilding of our schools. And that was a widely supported program, even though it was going to increase the debt service in the future from $25 million to $50 million. But it also had an effect on departments like Public Works, because their budget is limited for the next 5 years to $10 million a year, of which almost 2/3 goes for paving and sidewalks, which leaves only about 1/3 for all the other infrastructure activities. So if you're going to get any improvement in the improvement of the maintenance of our infrastructure, you're going to have to fight very hard at every capital budget hearing from now over the next 5 years to get this department more funds than the amount that they've been limited to. Meanwhile, the school system is still increasing their demands. So between the $140 million a year and the next year, they asked for $11 million more for Norwalk High School. And in the budget for the current year that's starting in July, they've asked for and gotten another $20+ million for the schools. That's above and beyond the $140 million that they got. And they're now running through the system another $15 million for all the overruns on the schools that originally were included in that plan. So all this money is going to the schools, and there's going to be nothing left for departments like Public Works. So you better mobilize as a group and mobilize the rest of your citizens so that this department gets funded in future years, or none of this is going to take place. Even the positive things that they've explained tonight, there won't be enough money unless you mobilize just as the school people mobilize to get money for their projects. So think about that and talk to your neighbors about that, because that's the only way that any of this infrastructure is going to be properly maintained and built over the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to the gentleman's point too, he's absolutely right. We have a little under $10 million worth of capital funding allocated each year for the next 5 years. About $6 million of that goes between paving, curbs, and sidewalks. So you're left with about, like he said, a third to do other things. And you know, a large-scale drainage project, I can tell you for one area, having done it, it took that's maybe a few $1 million. I mean, you can do small things between $500,000 and $1.5 million, but if you want those big fixes, that instant, you look out the window and you don't see flooding anymore for the less intense storms. I'm not going to say it's like a 500-year storm, but that's multi-million dollars of improvements. So that's if we only have $4 million left or less, we do one area, we're finished. We still have to pay the consultant to keep going. So this is part of a much bigger plan.
Do you work for the city? Are you an employee?
Yes, I'm the Chief of Operations in Public Works.
Okay, thank you for your service.
Is there
Very well.
FEMA money available or grant money that could be applied for?
Our consultant, during the interviews, multiple consultants identified funding sources for FEMA. That's going to be included. So during this iteration of when we do the studies, they're going to identify grant opportunities. Off the top of my head, I don't know what grants are available, but the consultant's going to steer us that way. Some we may be eligible for, I'm sure. Some coastal, maybe some not. I mean, Lisa, we have levees, we have pipes that discharge into the tidal area. That might help, but yeah, we're going to refine that effort as we go along, because we definitely do want to show grants. And the consultant
it's too early to tell. There's possibly, but it's too early to tell.
Right, but we're going to definitely be looking at that, because as we've all stated, the capital funding is only so much. Yes.
When this new assessment is done with the consulting firm when you hire, okay, is part of that for them to do some sort of cost analysis to show what we're going to pay in the long run by not doing some of this stuff?
I mean, that's one way of looking at it. We were going to do a cost analysis.
And what we as citizens pay in increased insurance, the money we spend to correct the problems ourselves out of pocket. I mean,
well, we want to keep the analysis focused. So conversely, we could look at the cost benefit. How much is it going to cost in capital funding versus the benefit that you have on for the number of homes impacted? It's like 39 residents, 39 homes. You could look at it, I guess, the other way. If you don't do it, how much is it going to cost them? But I don't know how that improves the situation.
One other thing, the list, the projects on the list were put on. How did they get on that list? Because people called in and said there's a problem with flooding?
Yes, so what happened was, we had the June storm, and just, you know, as probably
2018, right, Lisa?
Yeah, 2018. Just the complaints and floodgates flew open after that first 100-year flood happened, and the entire city was shut down. I-95, you couldn't drive on. You know, it's just no one could go anywhere. Gridlock. So we had already started and identified, you know, some issues from that. Then we had the back-to-back storms last fall, end of September, and then October 2nd. And then pretty much all hands on deck, our entire department mobilized, and went through every data source that we had of complaints that came in. And that's how we've been working through prioritizing, just trying to figure out, you know.
Okay, so I understand, that answer, all right, but the problem with that approach is that from all the comments that have been made, there seems to be what's coming out is that there's some lessons learned in terms of given the topography of certain areas, the drainage issues, the age of them, the size of them, where just by looking and analyzing that data, a good firm is going to be able to say, even though you may not have gotten a complaint from anyone, there's probably thousands of complaints out there that never come in.
That's why we're having a session
So,
like this.
but
right?
the consultant group has to take a look at, just from a scientific data analysis, you know, what areas are potential problem areas, even though no one has picked up the phone and called you.
The difference between with that in the city of Norwalk is that our storm drainage system is not entirely mapped. So someone can't come in. And again, we've asked for, like Mr. Davis said, we asked for money through several years, through the 14, 15 years I used to be in operations, now I'm in engineering, asked for funding to map our storm drainage system. Very important. Hadn't been funded, but we've been using in-house resources to do that mapping. So when the guys go out into the field, in the trucks, the vacuum trucks to clean the sewers, they also have an ARC pad, and they're picking up and they're mapping the system at the same time. So we're able to leverage and use the resources that we had that were funded and available to us, then to make that effort more effective.
levy you're in, but if we're going to
Like most communities.
But if we're going to do this based on the complaints that come in and problems that
No, it's a very
develop,
reactive, that's a reactive approach. Which is why we're gonna look at, the consultant is holistically gonna look at areas where there are complaints, but somewhere there's not, because the problem may not be necessarily in the area
And I can
that's
tell you,
having
there
the
are a lot of
problem.
complaints that came in years ago which were never listened to, and people gave up, like me for a while. I got encouraged by what you tried to do here. But,
No, you can't look at little snapshots, little areas, because you're gonna miss the big picture. You're gonna look at the trees, not the whole forest, absolutely.
Does the U.S. Geological Survey give you a good topology of the land?
We have plenty of topographic data for the city.
USGS, we have
Yeah.
1 foot
We have
contours.
1 foot contours for the whole city, they're updated.
Is
We
it-
have a lot of different sources of information.
It should be part of it.
So as you can see though, there's a lot of moving pieces to this, right? There's your mapping, there's your inventory, there's the problem spots reported, the problem spots not reported. But I can tell you, this list that Norwalk has, being only 2.5 months here, is more comprehensive and robust than the other municipalities I've seen, I've worked with. They've been doing the right thing. Now we're coordinating, getting ready together, and going towards the same way. But it's going to take some time. This is not overnight.
Wetlands is a curse as soon as you try to do something.
I mean, look, there's a lot of properties too that were developed in areas that back in the 50s and 60s, the subdivisions filled in wetlands, organic muck, peat soils, brought in fill that might not be the most suitable for draining soils, and development was different back then. It is definitely more stringent now, but somebody asked a question earlier, on private property, matters of civil issues, that is private property, that is building department, planning or zoning. So Public Works only has jurisdiction within the right of way. So I just want to, so we're trying to.
I will say though, when plan reviews do come in, we do look at the private drainage just to have another cross check to make sure that there's no problems from one property to the other, even though that's not part of our site plan review. It's our professional responsibility to take a look at it and flag it as an issue for another department. I think some of the very important things that I personally heard here tonight were how can we use the studies and the services we have for the consultant that's coming on board shortly for flooding and drainage to not even just look at it holistically from a drainage standpoint, but to look at it for how do we cross the departmental divides. Certainly I heard a lot of, as folks were bringing complaints and issues up, I hear planning and zoning a lot, development, planning and zoning. We really need to engage them heavily in this process and start thinking about how to incorporate development. And is development going to stop? Most likely not, but what do we need to have in place to make sure it's done correctly? So those are some of the higher goals, I think, that it's great we heard some very specific things about flooding and in certain neighborhoods, but that's certainly one area I think that, that, you know, we need to dig in a little bit more, so probably what we were thinking initially.
The impact that it has, that it can have.
Yeah, because with the big developments too, like in recent years, you know, community groups have said we need to do peer reviews on traffic studies on big developments, because they always came in as no significant impact on the traffic. But we all know that's not the case. And so it's no significant impact on drainage and the infrastructure either. So maybe we need to have planning and zoning have peer reviews on the drainage studies that the developer pays for, the same way that they have to pay for the peer reviews on the traffic analysis, and do the same thing on drainage. Because there's not really a lot of after the development kind of a, you know, a post-building review that's getting done on is the water runoff really what they said it was going to be? Did they really put in the, you know, the perfect pervious surface that they said they were going to? And are they managing it in the way that got approved by planning and zoning? So
I think kind of where we're going with that, Diane, is with the sanitary sewer system, we require all the developers to do a total downstream analysis, including flow monitoring, which Anthony alluded to before. We are now, it's not in our drainage manual from 2017, but we're moving in that direction also for stormwater, that the analysis needs to be taken to the end of the pipe, or the end. So, so we're probably moving in that direction. That's something we'll further develop, enhance our drainage manual, and that will be a more onerous hurdle to get over on the drainage side. And we'll probably take a look at that again with the consultant that we're bringing on board about how to implement that.
Yes, and the issue you run into is requiring a downstream analysis for drainage. You know, the developer, of course, will push back and say, well, why do I have to analyze the whole area? Why are you making me do the whole area? I'm showing what's leaving my site is not any more, in most cases less than before. Hey, that's not fair. Your infrastructure's there for a reason. So you get into a little bit of that. So we have to balance, I think is where you're going with that, to the maximum extent that we can, what as of right development is versus, I know Lisa used the word correct, responsible, whatever you want to look at it. Because we're not saying that you can't develop. If you meet zoning requirements and building requirements, and you're not adversely impacting infrastructure, you almost can't say you can't develop either. It's not fair. So there's that balance.
It's an eye-opener for me, this whole issue in terms of what you're doing on your property and how it impacts it's leaf blowing or whatever. But back onto the subcontractors who are doing all the work on the streets right now. And I saw it with Eversource. Okay, the amount of dirt that's left on the streets that then washes in to the storm sewers must be phenomenal, all right? And they don't clean it up properly. They don't take it away. And some of them sweep it and hose it. Right? I don't know whether there are any regulations for contractors that would prohibit them from doing that. I mean, construction sites have to put up those barriers so that you don't get the dirt coming over.
Right, yeah, the silt fence, black fence.
Talking about silt in your systems, it's occurring to me you have tons of that stuff that's flowing in as a result of the construction on the roads.
Right.
And when they restore the road, they should restore it back to the way they found it. Right? You know that a lot of times they just leave those rough, and it's never the same unless they do the right job.
Closing questions?
Yes, when it rains, I urge
You're so
the
right.
staff across with other departments to help you to go to the areas downstream to see what kind of flood and erosion controls are not being done. For instance, you have a lot of illegal contractor yards. I live in South Norwalk now, and those, I know planning and zoning is beginning to attempt to address that, but in the meantime, there's lots of sand piles and other things.
We do that. I mean, we have a lot of issues, and we try to go back into the system and find out where
there are some companies, including Divine Brothers, who I love because they're an old family, but you go there and there's dust flying when it dries, but those, I've looked at the drains on Commerce, they're filled with their materials of drag out. So we just need some spot enforcement or friendly enforcement in the press, and I think we'll begin to help you get some compliance. It has to happen not after all the studies are done. In December, it can happen now because most of these companies know they need to do something, but they've been able to get away with it. So there are ways to enforce to make it clear that you're coming, but just use someone as an example. And we have some of those piles all over the city now, including what GGP has stored over at Loman's Plaza, and all that material's running off into the storm drain. So it would help, it'd be helpful for you.
I know the enforcement's always the hardest.
But it can be done.
It has to be done, it can be done. With limited staff, it's difficult. And a lot of these are private, it's also too, it's private property issues, which now you're getting planning and zoning and building involved, which goes to your point.
Yeah, they can help you, they
Yes,
should help you.
they have to. Because we can only deal with what's in the right of way, which is a result of what's coming off the private property.
Well, the properties are into our right of way.
Understood.
And all I'm saying is, it's all upstream, let's make it known. And then we'll help you. We want you to stay.
Yeah, me too.
I'll send you Advil every week.
I need some.
Just